Today we are going to learn chemical reaction and types of chemical reaction, one of the important chapter of chemistry for class 10. In this video, we are going to focus on the types of chemical reaction. Basically, there are 4 types of chemical reaction. One is combination, second is decomposition, third is displacement, and fourth is double displacement. So basically, we are going to learn types of chemical reaction, and the first type of chemical reaction is combination reaction. Okay. So now in combination reaction, as the name suggests you, that reactant get combined. Okay. So there will be 2 or more than 2 reactant will combine to give one single product. Let's take the example of water. When hydrogen combined with oxygen, it reacts to give water. So you can see there is 2 reactant and it is giving a one single product. So combination reaction is the reaction where 2 or more than 2 reactant combine to give one single product is called combination reaction.
We'll require quicklime, distilled water, beakers, spatula, glass rod, test tube, dropper, and lime water. Take a small quantity of lime water using a spatula and transfer it into a beaker. Thermometer, glass rod. Slowly add water into the beaker so that quicklime remains submerged in the water. Quicklime reacts vigorously with water to produce a suspension of slaked lime, releasing a large amount of heat. Leave the beaker undisturbed for some time. A clear solution of lime water appears as the suspension of slaked lime settles down. Take a small quantity of lime water using a dropper and transfer it into a test tube. Then cork the test tube with a cork and insert a glass tube through the hole in the cork into the test tube. Blow exhaled air into the test tube through the glass tube. On blowing exhaled air, which contains sufficient CO2 gas, it turns the lime water milky. In this reaction, quicklime and water combine to form a single product, slaked lime, calcium hydroxide, so it is a combination reaction.
Coming to second types of chemical reaction is decomposition reaction. Now what is decomposition reaction? As name described, decomposition यानी breakdown. Decomposition reaction में reactant break होंगे, यानी यहाँ एक reactant, so one single reactant will break down into 2 or more than 2 products. Let's take the example of water. Okay, so water, when we provide some kind of energy, it can be light, it can be electricity, it can be a heat. Water get decomposed into hydrogen and oxygen. So one reactant decomposed to give 2 or more than 2 products is called decomposition reactant. Okay. Now decomposition reactant is basically 3 types. One is thermal decomposition. The first one is thermal decomposition. Second one is photolytic. And third one is your electrolytic. Now what is thermal decomposition? Thermal, जैसे नाम समझ में आ रहा है, thermal का मतलब होता है heat. सो ये डिकम्पोजिशन हमने कैरी आउट किया है ड्यू टू द प्रेजेंस ऑफ हीट. Thermal decomposition. Let's start with the thermal decomposition. Now, here we are a calcium carbonate. Okay, so one reactant getting decomposed to give calcium oxide plus carbon dioxide. Now, in this also, जो मैंने आपको बताया था कि decomposition reaction मतलब एक reactant होता है जो decompose होता है two or more than two products. बट इन दिस केस जो हम एनर्जी प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं डिकम्पोजिशन के लिए वो कौन सी एनर्जी प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं? दैट इज हीट. सो hence it comes under thermal decomposition. Any reaction which is carried out under the presence of heat and the reactant get decomposed to give a product is called thermal decomposition. Photolytic. Now photolytic, here the decomposition is carried out in the presence of sunlight. Let's take the example of this AgCl. Silver chloride. Silver chloride, when it get decomposed in the presence of sunlight to give Ag and Cl. Okay. तो photolytic decomposition यानी वो decomposition जो sunlight के presence में decompose हो जाती है. Okay. तो फोटोलिटिक डिकम्पोजिशन में हमारे नॉर्मल डिकम्पोजिशन भी जो भी जिसे बाहर जो भी कचरा फेंका रहता है तो अगेन दैट डिकम्पोजिशन कैरिड आउट अगेन बिकॉज ऑफ लाइट एंड बैक्टीरिया. सो लाइट एक बहुत क्रिटिकल रोल प्ले करता है डिकम्पोजिशन के लिए. इसीलिए हमारे बहुत सारे मेडिसिन और बहुत सारे कफ सिरप डार्क बॉटल्स में रखे हुए रहते हैं एंड उसके अंदर इंडिकेशन भी दिया रहता है कीप इट इन अ डार्क प्लेस बिकॉज देयर इज सम कंपाउंड व्हिच गेट डिकम्पोज्ड due to the light. Okay, coming to the another one, that is electrolytic decomposition. This decomposition take place in the presence of electricity. Example, water. So water get decomposed in the presence of electricity to give hydrogen and oxygen. You can also take the example of sodium chloride, NaCl. NaCl get break down in the presence of electricity to give sodium and chlorine. Okay, so this is the decomposition and the types of decomposition, that is thermal, photolytic and electrolytic.
Take a small quantity of ferrous sulfate crystals, FeSO4, 7H2O in a dry boiling tube. Hold the boiling tube with a test tube holder. Heat the boiling tube over the flame of a burner. On heating, ferrous sulfate crystals lose its water molecules and form white-colored crystals of anhydrous ferrous sulfate, FeSO4. On further heating, anhydrous ferrous sulfate decomposes to form dark brown-colored ferric oxide, Fe2O3, sulfur dioxide, SO2, and sulfur trioxide, SO3 gases. The gas emitted has the odor of burning sulfur. In this reaction, a single reactant FeSO4 decomposes to form three different products, Fe2O3, SO2, and SO3. So the reaction is a decomposition reaction.
So third type of chemical reaction that we are going to learn is displacement reaction. Displacement reaction is also called as substitution reaction, or it is also called as single displacement or replacement reaction. As name suggests, डिस्प्लेस, किसी को डिस्प्लेस करना पड़ता है. जैसे कि सीधी सी बात है, अगर कोई एक हेल्दी बच्चा रहेगा, मोटा लड़का रहेगा, वो आराम से पतले लड़के को डिस्प्लेस कर देता है अगर उसको बेंच उसको जगह चाहिए. सेम यहाँ भी वही, जैसे कि हमारे पास रिएक्टेंट ए है और रिएक्टेंट बी सी है, और अगर रिएक्ट ए बहुत ज्यादा रिएक्टिव है कंपेयर टू बी, अगर ए बहुत ज्यादा रिएक्टिव है कंपेयर टू बी, तो क्या होगा, ए है ना वो बी को डिस्प्लेस कर देगा और बनेगा AC प्लस बी. सो इसे कहते हैं डिस्प्लेसमेंट रिएक्शन. मतलब द मोर रिएक्टिव एलिमेंट will displace the weak reactive one and form the product. Let's take the example of Fe reacting with copper sulfate. Here, Fe is more reactive और Fe more reactive होने की वजह से कॉपर को डिस्प्लेस कर देगा और उसकी जगह ले लेगा और बन जाएगा फेरस सल्फेट और कॉपर डिपॉजिट डाउन हो जाएगा। आप दूसरा एग्जांपल भी ले सकते हो, लाइक zinc reacting with HCl. Here again the zinc is more reactive than H. Then the reaction will take place. Formation will be zinc chloride and a hydrogen gas will come out. So this both the reaction is your displacement reaction where the the strong reactive one is displacing the weak one and forming the product.
We will require copper sulfate, iron nails, distilled water, a beaker, measuring jar, test tubes, 2 clamp stands, a piece of thread and a glass rod. Take sufficient quantity of distilled water in a measuring jar and pour it into a clean beaker. To this, add a required quantity of copper sulfate. Stir the contents in the beaker using a glass rod until the copper sulfate crystals in the beaker dissolves completely. Pour sufficient quantity of copper sulfate into a test tube. Clamp the test tube to a stand. Then pour sufficient quantity of copper sulfate into another test tube. Clamp this test tube to another stand. Take 2 iron nails. Clean these by rubbing them with sandpaper so their color appears grayish. Tie 1 nail with a thread. Immerse this into one of the test tubes containing copper sulfate solution. Keep the 2 test tubes undisturbed for about 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, the color of the copper sulfate solution containing the iron nail turns light greenish color, whereas the color of the solution in the other test tube does not change. The greenish color of the solution is due to the presence of Fe2+ ions. Remove the iron nail from the solution. Compare it with the other nail. There is a brown coating of copper on the nail that was dipped in the copper sulfate solution. The other nail retains its grayish color. In this reaction, the ferrous ions displace copper ions from the copper sulfate solution. So the reaction is a single displacement reaction.
The another type of reaction which is there in class 10 is double displacement reaction. Now, double displacement reaction so double displacement reaction. In this reaction, the ion exchange takes place between the reactant to form the compounds. Let's take the example AB and CD. This AB and CD are the reactant. और क्या हो रहा है? A जो है ना वो C की जगह पे चले, तो A is replacing the G, C, and C replace the A like this, and the product will be AC plus BD. तो यहाँ आयन एक्सचेंज हो जा रहे हैं और रिएक्शन हो रहा है, इसीलिए इसे हम डबल डिस्प्लेसमेंट रिएक्शन भी कहते हैं. लेट्स सी द एग्जांपल ऑफ बेरियम क्लोराइड BaCl2 रिएक्ट हो रहा है सोडियम सल्फेट के साथ Na2SO4. बेरियम सोडियम की जगह ले लेगा एंड सोडियम विल टेक प्लेस ऑफ बेरियम और प्रोडक्ट बनेगा Ba barium sulfate, that is BaSO4 and NaCl. Okay, now here my sodium chloride, no, it is soluble, it is aqueous, पानी में dissolve हो जाता है, whereas barium sulfide sulfate, it is not a soluble, it is insoluble solid. यानी यहाँ आपका precipitate बनेगा. तो डबल डिस्प्लेसमेंट रिएक्शन को हम प्रेसिपिटेट रिएक्शन भी कहते हैं. मतलब जिस डबल डिस्प्लेसमेंट रिएक्शन में अगर आपको प्रेसिपिटेट मिले तो हम उसे प्रेसिपिटेट रिएक्शंस भी कहा जाता है. But there are some double displacement reaction where you do not get the precipitate, and those double displacement reaction is also called as neutralization reaction. So the double displacement reaction where you do not see a precipitate, that is also called as neutralization reaction. Example, सोडियम हाइड्रोक्साइड यानी हमारा बेस है, रिएक्ट हो रहा है HCl से, that is your acid. जो हाइड्रोजन को डिस्प्लेस करेगा और बनेगा NaCl, and there will be the formation of water. Here also the ions exchange, but the precipitate is not forming. So there is no formation of precipitate, and you are getting salt and water. This kind of reaction is called neutralization, which is also a double displacement reaction.
Will require sodium sulfate, barium chloride, dilute HCl, a beaker, conical flask, and test tubes. Take a small quantity of barium chloride in a test tube and transfer it into a conical flask. In another test tube, take a small quantity of sodium sulfate and transfer it into the conical flask containing barium chloride solution. A white precipitate of barium sulfate is formed immediately. This confirms the presence of sulfate, SO4, 2- ions. Stir the contents of the conical flask and keep it undisturbed for some time. The precipitate of barium sulfate settles down. Decant the upper solution from the conical flask into a beaker. Then add a small quantity of dilute HCl into the conical flask containing the precipitate. Swirl the flask well. The white precipitate is insoluble in dilute HCl. In this chemical reaction, sulfate ions are displaced by chloride ions and chloride ions are displaced by sulfate ions. So the reaction is a double displacement reaction.
So coming to the exothermic and endothermic reaction. What is exothermic and what is endothermic? Now, exothermic is the reaction in which energy is evolved. So, reaction in which energy is produced or evolved is called exothermic reaction. Most of this reaction is decomposition one. So, exothermic reaction is the reaction in which energy is evolved. Evolved or produced. Okay. So, let's take the example of respiration. In respiration also, the energy is evolved, right? That is the reason we do the work. Okay. One more example is carbon reacting with oxygen, giving a carbon dioxide, and also energy. When you burn any paper or petrol, okay, so they are the carbon compounds. When you burn, so they get burn in the presence of oxygen. The formation is carbon dioxide and also the energy. So whenever there is energy produced in the reaction, that kind of reaction is called exothermic reaction. One more example we can take, that is of respiration. So here is glucose C6H12O6. Okay, this is another example we are doing. So glucose reacting with oxygen to give what? To give carbon dioxide, water, and energy. Correct. So in a respiration also, we are eating the food, that is the glucose. The glucose is burning inside and we are getting carbon dioxide, water and energy. So in a reaction where energy is produced, those all reaction is called exothermic reaction. So endothermic reaction is the reaction where energy is absorbed. So in this case, you can write down the example of decomposition reaction. For example, calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate पे हमने energy दिया, like heating किया. Okay, when we are heating the calcium carbonate, it is getting a breakdown. Okay, to give calcium oxide and carbon dioxide. So it is absorbing the heat, to get breakdown. So this kind of reaction is called endothermic. Again, we can take the example of water also. Water is breaking down into hydrogen and oxygen. Why? Because it is absorbing the energy in the form of electricity. तो अगर एरो पे इलेक्ट्रिसिटी लिखा है, हीट लिखा है या सनलाइट लिखा है, ऐसे कोई भी फॉर्म में एनर्जी एब्जॉर्ब हो रही है रिएक्शन में, तो दोस रिएक्शन इज कॉल्ड endothermic reaction. Okay, coming to the reaction that is redox reaction. What is redox reaction? The reaction in which oxidation and reduction take place simultaneously. Okay, so redox reaction is the reaction where oxidation and reduction take place simultaneously. इसको कहते हैं redox reaction. पर इन redox को पहले समझने से पहले हमें oxidation समझना पड़ेगा और साथ ही साथ reduction समझना पड़ेगा. तो oxidation क्या होता है? Oxidation is the process where the addition of oxygen take place. मतलब जहाँ addition of oxygen हो और removal of hydrogen हो, दोनों में से कुछ भी. So oxidation reaction is the reaction in which either oxygen get added in the product side or hydrogen will be removed. Okay, those reaction is called oxidation reaction. So what is और reduction क्या होगा? Reduction ठीक इसका उल्टा होता है, यानी एडिशन ऑफ हाइड्रोजन, या तो हाइड्रोजन ऐड हो जाए या तो ऑक्सीजन रिमूव हो जाए, रिमूवल ऑफ ऑक्सीजन. सो ऑक्सीडेशन का मतलब एडिशन ऑफ ऑक्सीजन और रिमूवल ऑफ हाइड्रोजन, और रिडक्शन का मतलब एडिशन ऑफ हाइड्रोजन और रिमूवल ऑफ ऑक्सीजन. चलो इसके एग्जांपल्स कुछ देख लेते तो समझ में आए. जैसे कि मैंने लिया है कॉपर ऑक्साइड, रिएक्ट हो रहा है हाइड्रोजन से और हमें प्रोडक्ट मिल रहा है कॉपर प्लस वाटर. नाउ इन दिस केस माय copper oxide to copper, in this case oxygen is removed, right? ऑक्सीजन अगर रिमूव हुआ तो ये क्या है? यहाँ देखो, ऑक्सीजन, रिमूवल ऑफ ऑक्सीजन. तो अगर ऑक्सीजन रिमूव हुआ तो ये हो गया आपका रिडक्शन. और यहाँ हाइड्रोजन था पहले, हाइड्रोजन में ऑक्सीजन ऐड हो गया और बना वाटर. सो ये है आपका ऑक्सीडेशन. और इस रिएक्शन में रिडक्शन और ऑक्सीडेशन दोनों साथ में हो रहा है, मतलब इसे हम बोलेंगे रेडॉक्स रिएक्शन. तो जहां भी या तो ऑक्सीजन निकले या तो हाइड्रोजन ऐड हो तो उसे रिडक्शन कहते हैं. जहां ऑक्सीजन ऐड हो या हाइड्रोजन निकले उसे हम ऑक्सीडेशन कहते हैं. नाउ जो चीज रिड्यूस होता है उसे हम ऑक्सीडाइजिंग एजेंट कहते हैं. सो copper oxide is my oxidizing agent because it is getting reduced to copper, right? तो जहां रिडक्शन होता है वो आपका ऑक्सीडाइजिंग एजेंट हो गया, और जो ऑक्सीडेशन हो रहा है, जैसा हाइड्रोजन मेरा ऑक्सीडाइज हो रहा है वाटर को ना, तो ये है मेरा रिड्यूसिंग एजेंट. तो यहां तक हमने जितने भी टाइप्स ऑफ केमिकल रिएक्शन है क्लास 10 में वो स्टडी किया है.
Redox reactions. When magnesium combines with oxygen to form magnesium oxide, electrons on the magnesium atoms are more strongly attracted to the oxygen atoms than they are to their own nuclei, so they swap over, creating two ions. The magnesium ions have an electrical charge of +2 because they've lost 2 electrons, and the oxide ions have a charge of -2 because they've gained 2 electrons. Positive and negative charges attract, so the ions bond to form a lattice. This is magnesium oxide, a white powder. Oxidation is the loss of electrons, so in this reaction the magnesium has been oxidized. Historically, the only oxidation reactions that scientists knew about all involved oxygen. That's why they called them oxidation reactions. But now we know plenty of oxidation reactions that don't involve oxygen, like the formation of lead trees from zinc and lead nitrate solution. The zinc atoms have no electrical charge. Lead nitrate solution, on the other hand, consists of positively charged lead ions and negatively charged nitrate ions moving about in water. Zinc is more reactive than lead, which means it more readily gives up its electrons. So the zinc atoms lose their electrons to the lead ions. This turns the zinc atoms into positive ions, which move into solution, and the lead ions into lead atoms, which form beautiful metal crystals as they come out of solution. This is an oxidation reaction too. The zinc has been oxidized because it lost electrons. But one atom's loss is another's gain. And gain of electrons is called reduction. So with burning magnesium, oxygen is reduced as magnesium is oxidized. And when lead trees form, lead is reduced as zinc is oxidized. Oxidation and reduction are really just different aspects of the same thing, so we mix the words together and call the combination redox reactions. Redox reactions are reactions that involve the transfer of electrons. You can remember which reactants are oxidized and which are reduced using the mnemonic oil rig. Oxidation is loss and reduction is gain. Oil rig.